Welcome to UFOs over Pittsburgh. I'm your host, John Ventre. I'm the Pennsylvania State Director of the Mutual UFO Network. I'm joined by co-host Fred Saluga, who's the West Virginia State Director of MUFON. And today we will be discussing, are aliens really evolved dinosaurs? Well, Fred, I decided to wear my hat today.
A little good in it, Joe.
We could be two cowboy UFO. I'm an old cowboy from the Rio Grande.
And now you're in Pennsylvania.
Oh, sorry. All right. Today's episode, we're going to talk about, and this is interesting actually, I read this book called Aliens, the Final Answer by David Barclay, and we're going to talk about whether the alien and the gray is actually a dinosaur that evolved. Because, as you know, people say there are reptilians that evolved, right?
Quite a bit of them, yeah.
Yeah, well, and so we'll talk about that as we go through this. But
I don't know about the grays, though, John. I mean, the grays.
Well, it could be some form, like maybe even that reptilian that we see is really a dinosaur and not a reptilian. It came from the dinosaurs. But, you know, when I first saw the book, I said, what? But then as I read it, you know what was interesting with this? He actually did a lot of research with a lot of information in here. So let's run through this, and it's really interesting. He talks about evolution, and he says that there's 130,000 fossils have been found, but that's only 1% of the fossil record. The fossil record is really incomplete to explain evolution, because none of the fossils actually explain evolution. So apparently there's got to be a lot more out there that hasn't been discovered, because it doesn't explain the diversity that we have on this planet. So he says being unable to find the missing link is a problem, obviously, for evolution, and it's different for all other animals on Earth. We essentially are no different now than what we were in the very beginning. Evolution produced humans fully developed. Right. You know, and that's the thing that I've been actually reading a lot of lately. We have very little in common with primates, especially our chromosome count. We walk upright. We differ from other simians who have long legs and short arms. We have an opposable thumb. Our feet bear very little resemblance to simians, and we are far more savage than apes.
Well, see, when you say we're not the same, you look at Bigfoot. Now, we're the same as Bigfoot. Only he's bigger.
Well, yeah, we probably have more in common with Bigfoot than we have in common with apes and chimps. Paleontology revises backwards into geological time its estimates of the length of time humankind has been on Earth. And that's true because they always, when they find something, they make it fit the theory of evolution.
Right.
And they go backwards.
Yeah.
You know, and everything has been pushed. If you look at a textbook from 100 years ago, they were talking about 30,000 years, 40,000. Now they've made it millions of years.
Right.
Really interesting. It says here that humankind had appeared on Earth well before hominids. Isn't that amazing? And it says that human footprints have been found to be 40 million years old. At Glen Rose, Texas, a 16-inch footprint was found next to dinosaur tracks.
Right, I've seen that.
Yeah, I've
It was
seen that
It
too.
was on computer.
There's even one track that has the human footprint, and it's a shoe, and the dinosaur track was partially covering it, so it stepped on top of it, meaning the human print was there before the dinosaur print. They also can't account for humankind's unique intelligence, which is unnecessary in terms of survival of the fittest, nor humankind's lack of body hair. Mankind has 312 distinct physical traits that set him apart from apes and chimps.
Okay.
I'm telling you, the evolution story, the more you read, it doesn't add up.
But again, they got to keep that story going, because if they say
That's
what brought
science.
us, I mean, you look at God bringing us here,
They will never say that.
they won't.
Yeah.
But again, when you're talking about the reptilian there, when Adam and Eve allegedly was eating the apple or whatever, the snake, he told him, from now on you shall slither on your stomach. So allegedly then it had to have arms and legs at one time.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, so, but again, the government don't want us to know that, because then they got to say, well, yeah, we came from someplace else.
Well, you know,
and that blows their whole theory.
He actually gets into this. He says we have no relationship to monkeys. You know, dogs can mate with wolves,
Yeah.
right? You have donkeys and horse, you have lions and tigers, and you produce ligers. We are totally unable to mate with gorillas or chimps, and the chromosomes don't match up. I mean, you know, how do they explain that? They say we came from them, but it doesn't appear that... He actually proves in this book that the gorilla, it just appeared also.
Right.
It didn't come from chimps. The gorilla appeared, and then we appeared totally separate from the other hominids and chimps and stuff. So it says if survival of the fittest could produce us from mammals in under 70 million years, then dinosaurs have been here for 150 million years, but the thing was, they were the top of the line for 150 million years. They weren't hiding in burrows. That was your survival of the fittest here before humans, and here longer for twice as long as we've been here.
But if you look at the theory of evolution, they come from a one-cell protozoa.
Which is
How
impossible.
long would it take to make a dinosaur weighing 5 tons and 50 feet long?
They're saying that each of those changes I read now, they say some of those changes could take 1 billion years. And then for all of them to take place, there's like in one strand of DNA, like 3 trillion amount of information that's in there. It doesn't make any sense, but that's what they teach. Is it possible that evolution, as envisioned by Darwin, could fail to produce an intelligent dinosaur? You know, and then he puts a chart here. Fish came first 425 million years ago, amphibians 390 million years ago, reptiles 350 million years ago, dinosaurs 215 million years ago, hominids 200 million, but you know, mammals were really 70 million years ago. Excuse me, hominids 70 million years ago, mammals 200 million, birds 150 million years ago.
But look at this too. How many times has the Earth been destroyed? I mean,
There are 5. There's been 5 great.
So if it's been destroyed 5 times, we had to start all over with a one-cell protozoa
That's true.
and go back again. So I mean,
That's a good point, Fred.
Yeah,
So now you're saying it's happened 5 times.
Yeah,
It didn't just happen once.
Right,
That's a good point. You know, there's been 4 ice ages and 5 total destructions
Right.
with usually asteroid strikes. So, so why not an intelligent dinosaur? For 150 million years, the dinosaur ruled the Earth. Then it says, and I did notice, there are 5 types of dinosaurs that have opposable thumbs, like the raptor has an opposable thumb. That was actually prevalent among dinosaurs. They ate meat, which is it's funny how when they say with humans, when we started eating meat, our brain size got bigger. Well, the dinosaurs always ate meat, you know, and some of them, I guess, were vegetarians. But they stood upright, they had an opposable thumb, and there were 5 types of dinosaurs that did that. So, you know, it kind of makes sense. If you stick strictly to evolution and use that logic of, you know, they were here twice as long as us, why didn't they develop? So now he says the grays, is really an intelligent dinosaur. He calls them, this guy made a model actually, Russell is his last name. He calls it a dinosauroid, right? He says it's the gray. It's bipedal, newt-like skin, domed head, large eyes, clawed hands, slits for nostrils and mouth, and no visible ears. So he's saying that gray is an evolved dinosaur, because the skin is not human skin on that. It's more like like a reptile type skin. But he says, now get this, reptiles were here before the dinosaurs, right? So so he says, of course, if dinosaurs, following evolution, you had reptiles, dinosaurs came from reptiles and then mammals. But somehow, reptiles are cold-blooded and somehow produced warm-blooded mammals and dinosaurs and then birds. How did they go from cold-blooded reptiles to warm-blooded animals?
Somebody came down and changed their DNA.
Well, there is something to either or. The evolution story is half true. Maybe evolution does take place on the planet, but it doesn't appear that we are evolved.
Right.
You know, it almost like the God story of creation to put us in the middle. And that's, you know, like even with Cain and Abel, that when Cain got banished, he got a wife somewhere.
Yeah, but see, that too. Okay, he was banished to wherever, but he went to the town. Well, where the hell did the town come from?
So there's more, there could be evolved humans and created humans, you know? But, so he talks about Neanderthal, and he says evolution seemed to pass them by. They stayed the same the entire 80,000 years they were here. Cro-Magnon showed up for only 10,000 years somewhere during the Ice Age, 20 or 30,000 years ago, but they only lasted 10,000 years. And the Cro-Magnon appeared fully formed out of nowhere and had a brain that was larger than ours. Right. So the Cro-Magnon actually had a bigger brain than us, popped up, it was there 10,000 years and was gone. I mean, the whole evolution thing, it's so hard to believe. And then he says, nature does not make great leaps. Cro-Magnon seem to have appeared with no warning.
They again were put here
for a reason. It seems that there's something that goes on, a creation, an engineering, something that goes on. And evolution is a false science. It's a theory, and they dropped the theory part. They just made a law. You know, then he gets into Admiral Byrd, and this gets interesting. He says the Antarctic expedition in 1929, 1930 with Admiral Byrd, it produced the Majestic 12 elite group in 1947, you know, at the request of President Truman, to keep the secret of the survival of a superior intelligent dinosaur race inside the planet that we thought was ours. So he's saying that that's what Admiral Byrd found out back then. So before I continue, any thoughts on that?
Well, I kind of believe it, because I think that we do have people living underground. I mean, you know, and as I always say, I believe that the government has part of them is alien. So they would be covering everything up. I mean, it's a good cover-up. I mean, that's where creation came from. Like I said, a one-cell protozoa, and it developed. Well, you know, a lot of people buy it. But how could they come down and change our DNA? How did you become like an Indian? How did you become a Chinese? How did you become African-American? Again, how long would that take to do that?
The races make no sense. Yeah. You know, I read one book
it was made. DNA was changed.
Yeah.
But who changed it?
I mean, it's almost like you look at, you know, you have Russians, and then right south of them are the Chinese and Mongolians, right? That would be like saying here in Pennsylvania, if you cross the turnpike, it's a totally different race of people.
And talk different.
It doesn't make any sense. It really doesn't, you know?
But as long as the government can get people to feel that way and believe that way, then they're doing good.
And you know what it was? I read in one book that they said, okay, now that there's been a lot of Africans that moved, immigrated to Sweden, they've allowed a large minority race there. The question was, how many years does it take for the black African to turn white? That's evolution. Because supposedly when we went north out of Africa, we became white.
Right.
So we should expect the Africans to turn white now in what, 10,000 years, 20,000 years? I mean, it poses some questions that can't be answered.
No, they're not going to be answered.
But it's interesting stuff because I read a lot of books, you know. That's why we review them here. All right, so now he gets into the flying saucer. And this is one of my questions, and we're going to discuss this at our field investigators meeting. You know, if the flying saucer, they seem to be able to breathe our atmosphere, tolerate our gravity, and generally behave like us, the answer to where they come from is obvious, planet Earth.
Right.
Well, think about that, Fred. I mean, what's the chances that they could breathe here without using, you know, a breathing apparatus? They're not too small, too big, that the gravity affects them. And they can do a hybrid program and reproduce when we can't reproduce with chimps and apes that are 96% similar.
And how many
Makes no sense.
How many aliens have you seen with headgear on that helps them breathe?
That's what I'm saying. They
No,
don't.
hardly any.
They always seem to be able. They may have a outfit or a suit or some sort on, but they don't seem to. They seem to be able to breathe.
And look at the different type of aliens. Now let's go back in say the early 1900s, when they had the 1890 when they had the big clapback.
Yeah, 1896.
They had elves. They had gnomes. They had. It's a totally different alien. So do the aliens involved, do they stay here?
Well,
Or did these aliens here actually make them?
you know, Fred, it almost seems like there is an alien thing that goes on from space. Like we've said, the 1973 UFO wave. But even those were wearing helmets, right? Remember the Glenn Shore, the guy, he took the picture, the cop, he was fully in uniform with a helmet and a mask on. And those were alien abductions. It seems like, Fred, after 1980 is the date I'm going to be using now, it went from being a physical craft and somebody in a uniform grabbing you, it went to this out-of-body experience. You know, it really became strange. All right, let me run through this because there's a lot more here. It says the hybridization, okay, let's see. It's illogical to suppose an improvement can be obtained by mating with an evolutionary inferior, right? And that's true. You know, I read too with mutations, they say, well, it's a mutation produced this. But you lose genetic material with a mutation. So every mutation produces a de-evolved creature, not an evolved creature. So it couldn't produce us, who is smarter, through evolution and hybrids. You lose material.
Well, again, you can look at the same thing with Bigfoot. Okay, you have Bigfoot has 5 toes, 4 toes, 3 toes. Okay, now you talk to a lot of people, they say, well, that's because of evolution. I mean, and they you know, whatever they did, and one came to form. Really, I mean, there's more 3 toes now out there than 5 toes. I mean, so how's that happen? I mean, they had 3 toes from the beginning, you know?
Well, now he gets into Fatima. He says that there's a common factor that makes some people see or think they see the Virgin Mary while others see UFOs. And then he starts talking about the Fatima, Portugal incident. You know, he makes a good point here. One of the witnesses was the mayor of the town. Some people saw UFOs, others saw. But then he says a year after the Fatima sighting in October of 1918, a year later, was the Spanish flu, which killed 15 to 25 million people. Is that a coincidence that the 3 girls who saw the Virgin Mary, 2 died shortly after, a couple of years later, and it could have been from the Spanish flu. One ended up living. The church took her, segregated her, and kept her in a convent so she couldn't talk to anybody. She was basically a prisoner. But the Spanish flu showed up the following year, and he says it's related. I've thought that too about the Black Plague and everything back in the 1400s. Because there were sightings of UFOs back then too.
Right. And they could have did that to get rid of the population so they could rebuild it how they wanted it.
Well, then now he starts to get off, and this is important. This is where he shows his scientific arrogance, because this guy doesn't believe in God. He says the existence of God is equivalent to the childish belief in Santa Claus, right? And I want to get to his personal, here it is. This is it. Now listen to this, Fred. Here's his personal experience. Now you tell me where he's coming from, right?
Okay.
Here's his personal experience in the 1960s. He experimented with Ouija boards. He became the target of an entity. His home became under siege by some sort of supernatural entities, apportations, which means things just appeared out of nowhere, automatic writing, and all kinds of paranormal stuff. UFOs appeared overhead of every conceivable kind when he dabbled in the occult. I experimented with mediums, miracles, extraterrestrials, and finally demonic effects, the sole purpose which seemed to be to reinforce whatever belief system I had. Eventually, the contact petered out, but it lasted long enough for me to come to the conclusion that the prime qualification for a contactee is a predisposition to the kind of personal delusions that superior entities would possibly choose an uninfluential non-entity like us.
Right.
You know what I found interesting here? While this is going on, he never called upon Jesus to protect him. Dr. Carla Turner, the same thing as a scientist, never called upon the spiritual help to protect them. I think this guy got it totally wrong here. So he says the intelligent dinosaur that was our creator might just be ready to reclaim its property. See, I think he totally missed the point here that he should have called upon a spiritual help to fight a spiritual battle. But he won't say, he says we came from dinosaurs, but he won't go into the demonic realm, although it was paranormal, and he won't call for help.
But see, again, that goes back to the old thing, the good and the evil. He don't want to go with the good. He's looking at the dinosaurs created us, and that's what there is. There's nothing else there.
Yeah, because science can't explain any of that.
Yeah.
So now he gets into, he talks about the 1908 Tunguska over Siberia explosion. He mentions that. And what he says, that was an attempted UFO landing, okay, but it exploded. Okay, but I get maybe it's an attempted dinosaur craft. He doesn't really explain that though, He goes back to Fatima, right, and he talks about the secret that was supposed to be revealed in 1960. A decision was made by the Catholic Church not to reveal the secret, which made them, and really the CIA, who denies UFOs, to lose face. So what would cause these establishments to embarrass themselves and take it on the chin that they said they were going to tell the truth in 1960, but they didn't do it, and he talks about, Kennedy, John Paul I, that were actually killed over this. The truth is so devastating that the lives of presidents and popes have been sacrificed. Then he talks about the Third Reich being a cult and based on the novel The Coming Race.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah, well, we've talked about that before. Hitler was a contactee, and he talks about this incident at the Eagle's Air in the Bavarian Mountains where he's having a meeting with his generals, and he's saying he's having a hallucination. He's crying out, "Look over there, look in the corner, look over there, who is that?" Nobody could see anything, but he was terrified. He actually fell in the corner cowering because he saw a demon. So, it's funny how he tries to make a case that we evolved from, that the dinosaur is the alien, but then he ignores all the other proof that he presents.
Well, but that's what he wants to do. He wants you to say, well, what you're saying right now, to debate it. That's the whole thing. The book's a debatable book. I mean, like you say about Hitler. Again, certain people can see things that others can't. I mean, it's like, you know, with UFOs, you can have 3 people standing there, one sees a UFO and the other 2 don't see it.
But doesn't that tell you then that it's an intelligence, an interdimensional intelligence that's either projecting the UFO in your mind? Why can one see it and 2 can't? That tells you it's telepathy. You know, or some of them just appear, materialize, and dematerialize, like it's matter being manipulated, and it's not really flying here from space. That's, you know, that for me, I think this thing is interdimensional. You know, the space thing, it might be 5% of it.
And it's the same with me, with my cryptids. I mean, where did they come from and where did they go? I mean, how can you have something that comes here, like say the thing down in South Carolina, the lizard man. He comes and he goes, never to be seen again.
They disappear.
I mean, how can that be?
Well, you know, we're almost out of time, Fred. He made a good point, and he did a lot of good research. And if you think about evolution being true, then, you know, the dinosaur was here first.
Right.
They stood upright, opposable thumbs. They should have evolved into something.
But again, when the dinosaurs died, how did we start all over again?
I don't know.
That's the problem.
There were 20 of us hiding in a cave somewhere, and we survived it. So, Fred, let me take my hat, put it on him.
Okay.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks, Fred.
Yep.